Alright, in this video we're going to get started with some examples of how you can approach this project using TDD or test-driven development. If you don't know off the top of your head right now what test-driven development is, you should go back and rewatch those videos about that or do some further Googling. Another name for the same process, which we're going to use a lot in this video, is not just TDD but also red-green refactor. So that red meaning you start off with a failing test, green, you then get a passing test, and then refactor, you go back to that passing test or that passing code, and you make sure that it's a little bit more optimal, a little bit cleaner, a little bit more maintainable, just in other words, better than before. Alright, so after watching this video, I'm ready to go on and do some of this yourself, but let's get you started. So first off, we've got our code in the same state how it was at the end of the last video. So we've got our describes, and we've got the actual code that our tests are describing. So let's actually create a function here called isValidDate, and it will take a date string, and that's all we need. So before we write our tests for this function, what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be well, this is called stubbing out a function, so just having something that my test can call that won't necessarily work. Alright, so we've got isValidDate as our describe here, since that's the main function in our program. Now, one of the most important parts of good software design is making sure that you break everything up into small manageable pieces. So let's go look at the requirements for this project. Okay, so we're going to create a simple website with an input box that takes a string. We're going to skip that for this video. And I'm submitting the string, verify that the string is validate. We're going to skip that too, because we're interested in just the JavaScript part, not the HTML. Alright, so step 7 here. Validate is in the format month, month, day, day, year, year, or month, month, day, day, year, 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 year. Where instead of dashes, you may also use slash or dot as a delimiter. Okay. So we know that in order to be a valid format, there are all sorts of rules for it. But it's either going to have a length of 8 or 10 characters, and that's a pretty simple thing that we can test for. So in our actual code, we're going to have a function called hasValidLength. It's going to take date. Now inside isValidDate, say, no, we can just leave that the way it is. Alright, so down here, we're going to do another describe because we're going to specifically test our hasValidLength function. Now again, what we're doing here is unit tests. Now what unit tests are is they're tests of the smallest possible unit within your program, the smallest meaningful unit. And so instead of testing isValidDate directly right now, we're going to test our hasValidLength function to make sure that we're getting a valid length. So let's see, it has 8 or 10 characters. Alright. Okay. Alright, so we're going to expect that hasValidLength of alright, let's do 03-13/1991. So we're going to start with our base case. So by that I mean we're going to start with how we expect it to behave if everything's working right. So I'm going to pass in a valid date, so expect this to be true. Now, I'm also going to expect has valid length of 03, 13, 91 to also be true. Let's make this, yeah. All right, so we've got our two base cases there. So we save that. We'll see that it runs the test and it fails because it expected undefined to be true. So remember, functions, if you don't define what they're returning, they'll just return undefined. All right, so we've got our base cases. Now let's also get in some cases here for when they should fail. As valid length, let's see, 03, 13, 1991, 1. We expect this to be false, and we're going to expect, in fact, let's just copy this. So let's make it 1 short. So we're going to expect this to be false. So normally it should be 8 or 10 characters, so we've got 11 characters. We've got 9 characters. In fact, let's do this again for 7 characters. So a lot of bugs tend to be at the edges of things. And by that I mean, so 8 and 10 are the magic numbers we want it to be. So most or a large number of programming bugs are called off by 1 errors, where if there's a given number or index that is sort of the limit, then it's going to be either 1 too short or 1 too long. So that's what we're going to check for here. We're going to check for 1 bigger than the maximum, 1 smaller than the minimum, and the 1 in between the 2 valid values. All right, so we're testing this. Of course, it's red. All sorts of expects fail. All right, so we got the red part ready, a red-green refactor. So let's go into hasValidLength. Let's actually make this work. So I'm going to say if date.length equals 8, or date.length equals 10, return true. Else, return false. Now hopefully this will return that it passes. All right, it did. All right, so we're now on to green. Or we successfully passed green, because now we've got this code working the way that we've described it here inside of our tests. Now we're on to the refactor portion. So anytime we've got an if-else where it's going to return true in the if and else in the or false in the else, then you can actually just remove the else and leave that return. This is called an implicit else, because if this if runs, it's or if this if is true, then it's going to return and leave the function anyway. So that else is just sort of redundant. So we've just optimized our code a little bit, or refactored it to remove that unnecessary else, and the tests pass. Now we can also simplify this a little bit more by actually just returning our Boolean expression here. So let's get rid of all of that. So let's save this change. All right, looks like this worked. All right, so now we're going to, while this is a valid test for the actual assignment you're supposed to be doing, I'm going to actually do a test here that is not one that you're going to want to replicate. So I'm going to act as if I expect all valid dates to begin in March, because that's when I was born. As valid month. All right, so it begins, it is in March. Function. All right, so we're going to expect, so So 3, 12, 19. Oh, no, that's the input for. So let's stub out this function that we're going to be writing. So function is in March. Next date. Return. Yeah, we'll just leave that alone. All right. So has valid month. Yeah, let's call that has valid month. All right, so we're going to expect has valid month to be true. We'll also expect has valid month, passing in the same date but with 4 year digits. What was that? 12. To be true. All right, now let's write, now we've got our base cases, let's get down some failing ones. Expect has valid month 0, 4, 12, 19 to be place. Nineteen. Let's go one above. All right. So let's save this. All right. So looks like it failed. Is valid month. Has valid month. Is in March. All right. So that's the red portion. We've got our failing tests. Now let's move on and make it passed. All right. So let's return date at 0 plus date at 1. So if date at 0 plus date at 1 equal to or 3, return true, else return false. All right, looks like we're passing. So notice how we are now passing 2 tests because we got these 2 its here. So that's going to get bigger as we write more tests. All right, so let's optimize this. So again, a quick way we can optimize this is by using an implicit else. All right, looks like that's still working. Good. Now we can also reduce this the same way we did before. All right, that's good. Now, I personally don't like the way I'm pulling out different characters and concatenating them. Let's actually do date.substring 0 to 2. All right, looks like we're failing now. So it looks like date.substring is not a function. So is substring a function? No. All right. So this is part of the red-green refactor process. Sometimes when you're refactoring or you're making your code even try to pass in the first place, it's going to start failing again. And that's why we have tests to let us know that we are failing. Okay. Now the actual method that I do want to use here is slice. All right. And again, what slice does is it will take a string or an array and it will return a version of that string or that array starting at this index up until but not including this index. So this gives us the index 0 and index 1, and then stops at index 2 and adds those together. So that's how we're getting the month from there. All right. So that's your quick introduction to how you'll be using TDD on this project. If you have any questions, feel free to ask one of the instructors.